The death of Genghis Khan is the biggest scandal of all time. I mean, if the great Khan was an Egyptian, we're sure he would have been mummified, and a sphinx would have been built to honor such a legend. Unfortunately, he died mysteriously, and his tomb is missing until this very day. No matter how many times I think about it, it doesn't add up. There's a lot that they aren't telling us. Let's start with a little backstory. Genghis Khan was actually one of the richest men that ever lived on this planet. And though he's long gone, his tomb has been missing since like forever. And the stories and myths actually don't add up. Think about it. A phenomenal warrior with an unbeaten record who kept amassing wealth and conquering territories to his last breath, who is, in fact, one of the richest and most powerful men that ever lived, died, and then somehow his tomb goes missing forever. How could a person with so much affluence pass away after a record-breaking life without a single trace of his tomb? Really, what are the odds? Is his tomb really missing, or is there something we don't know? This might just be the greatest scandal in history. Even Watergate and Bunga Bunga weren't half as terrible. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, we'll start with the basics. Who is Genghis Khan? Also known as Genghis Khan, this man literally single-handedly founded and fearlessly ruled the first Khan of the Mongol Empire. He fought and won many conquests, and never backed down at any battle, and slowly, conquest after conquest, he built the world's largest empire at the time. Bear in mind that this was thousands of years ago, before technology even existed. Thanks to him, the Mongol Empire was twice as large as any empire anyone had and had ever built, but not without mass bloodshed and strong alliances. The Mongol Empire was 11 million square miles, and he kept stretching it further and further, conquering more lands and subduing more kings. The Mongol Empire wasn't restricted to Asia as it is now. No, it spread as far down as Europe, so they had a blend of both Eastern and Western cultures. A very rich culture. His accomplishments were so astounding that many books and movies have been created around his story, yet there are so many things you probably didn't know about him. Now, bet you didn't know that the great Khan had a tough childhood. From the get-go, Genghis had to deal with some seriously tough stuff on the Mongolian steppe. His dad got poisoned when he was just 9, and later his own tribe kicked out his family, leaving his mom to raise 7 kids solo. Rumor has it that because of this, his first ever conquest might have even been a showdown with his half-brother over food. Tough life. Despite all the chaos, by his early 20s he was already a force to be reckoned with, rallying a crew and making alliances with big-shot tribe leaders. By 1206 he had the whole steppe scene under his belt and set his sights on conquering beyond. Another not-so-popular fact about Genghis is that he actually quite literally had no friends. Just enemies. Sorta explains why he was so wild and blood-hungry. Anyway, the great Khan spent his entire life making babies and gaining territories, until he eventually died. Now here's where it gets interesting. After dethroning many kings and harnessing such great wealth, the legend suddenly disappeared. Not the kind of disappearance that we got from the biblical Enoch. Nah, his own was tilted more towards vanishing into thin air. And while some people are busy trying to find his tomb to no avail, we are of the opinion that the entire thing was staged. Here's why. So remember how we said that the great Khan was probably the greatest and bravest warrior ever? Well, firstly, we actually don't know how he died. Everyone's clueless. There are so many dramatic tales about how he died. Some people say that he fell off a horse and died, although that's the least likely cause of his death. Like seriously, what are the odds? Others say he was terribly injured in skirmish, and those injuries sort of killed him. While another set of scholars said that he was sick for a while until he eventually died. The latter seems to be the most realistic and reckoned with narrative, although bottom line, he died in 1227. At least the majority agrees on that. The next mystery is actually about how the great Khan was buried. I mean, the guy was mysterious, even in his death. Some myths say that in order to make his grave impossible for anyone to find, a river was diverted over it. Some others believe that Khan's grace was trampled on over and over by many different horses, and then eventually, several trees were planted over his grave area. And just when we thought we'd heard it all, the Erdeni Topçi debunked all the existing tales, saying that the great Khan's grave was empty from the very minute it got to Mongolia, and he was not alone on this. Apparently Altan Topçi thought the same. He always argued that the mausoleum in Ordos only housed Genghis's shoes, shirts, and tents. His body, however, was missing. The strangest of all these tales is Turnbull's point of view. Turnbull, contrary to public opinion, shared a different story about Genghis Khan's grave rediscovery, occurring 3 decades after he died or more or less vanished. Legend has it that a young camel was laid to rest alongside the Khan, and years later, the grieving mother camel was discovered mourning at the tomb. Japanese archaeologist Shinpei Kato also mentions this account, suggesting that the baby camel was interred to guide the Khan's family to the burial site when required, a narrative found in at least one ancient Chinese text. But we don't actually believe any of these tales. The only narrative that sounds more like the Almighty Khan is Marco Polo's point of view. So here's what went down. Genghis did have a burial that was pretty befitting, and this burial was graced by 2,000 slaves. No family, no close associates, just 2,000 whooping slaves. Not that's the first red flag. Now these slaves were, of course, not alone. Some soldiers went with them to guard them. At least that's what happened until the burial ended, and these soldiers killed all 2,000 slaves. The massacre didn't end there. Nah, that wasn't enough bloodshed to lay the great Khan to rest. Another group of roughly trained soldiers who were known to kill anything and anyone that crossed paths with them appeared from the blues and killed the soldiers that had been sent to guard the slaves. These were high-level training soldiers. As if that wasn't enough, here's the plot twist. These Special Forces personnel then committed suicide as soon as they reached their destination. Sounds and smells fishy, right? The worst part is that this tale was somehow excluded from all the contemporary reports and records of Genghis Khan. Clearly there are many secrets hidden beneath the surface, but that's why we are here. There's definitely a lot of mystery around Khan's death and burial, but to help you understand better, we'll need to give you a little brief on the kind of man the great Khan actually was. First things first, the guy was rich. I mean, like stupendously rich. According to Forbes, he has a new worry of $150 trillion. That's a lot of money now, so it would have meant much more back then. Yet many people claimed he had a very frugal lifestyle. With money, yeah. With love and romance, not so sure, because tell me why this guy had 1,700 wives, and with 1,700 wives, you can only guess the host of offspring he would have been able to produce. But then we don't blame him. Genghis Khan was also quite impressive too. Even ladies from the 1200s would have found it difficult to resist the blue-eyed, fiery-headed, sexy god with a muscular build that would make Henry Cavill green with envy. The only person that ever lived to be as rich as Khan is Mensa Musa. And guess what? Mensa Musa's death was not well documented either. No one knows where he was buried. Are you starting to connect the dots yet? He obviously had it all planned from the start. I mean, you can tell even from his last words. I have conquered for you a large empire, but my life was too short to take the whole world, that I leave to you. He wanted the whole world, but he couldn't get it. But he talked about leaving the rest, which means he was definitely taking something from here. History also recorded that he was very generous with his soldiers and shared the spoils of war liberally with them every single time without fail. It's one of the reasons why they were terrifyingly loyal to him. Now, if you remember, we talked about the role of the soldiers in his burial. Judging from his generosity to them and their loyalty to him, the soldiers must have been party to his plan also. And that's odd. In life, he was the most powerful person on earth. He was the universal ruler in Mongol Genghis Khan, of an empire that would eventually stretch from the Pacific Ocean into Eastern Europe, encompassing large swaths of present-day China, Russia, and the Middle East. Yet his grave is unmarked and remains undiscovered. What's more odd is we don't even know the cause of his death. I mean, it's been 800 years since left, and still no one has found his body. Bear in mind that Genghis Khan once killed a man who happened to have been the governor of Ortar by pouring molten silver into his eyes and ears as a gruesome display of poetic justice. Yes, you heard right, silver. Well, have you ever stopped to wonder where he got the molten silver from? The guy was that rich. However, he had so many children that at least 16 million people on the planet are direct descendants of Genghis Khan. Well, we're convinced that after living such a frugal life and amassing such great wealth, on his deathbed, the great Khan must have realized that he was going to die without truly enjoying the rewards of his labor. So he must have worried about how his many wives and children would have fought over his wealth when he left, so he probably hid a huge fraction of his wealth in his tomb, hoping to take it to paradise, and plotted with the soldiers and slaves that buried him to keep his tomb secret after settling them with some money. He was obviously trying to hide something in his tomb, and that's why he didn't want any living soul to know where he was buried. What do you think? Do you agree with this theory? Or do you have other assumptions as to why we haven't found the tomb of Genghis Khan? Let us know in the comments. In the meanwhile, if you enjoyed this video, then you definitely need to subscribe to Mystery for more cool content like this.